Welcome to Luminescence Common Sense Spirituality, a show designed to share spiritual insights with you so that you can comprehend the universe and how it functions. You are about to experience raised consciousness. This is a place where spiritual principles are shared with the goal of assisting you to expand your understanding of both the seen and unseen worlds. Luminescence Common Sense Spirituality helps you to discern the timeless truths handed down from wise sages through the ages, from the airy-fairy nonsense that is being taught today. Now, here is your host, Lynn Wyeth.
Welcome to Luminescence Common Sense Spirituality, the radio show that disseminates esoteric knowledge and common sense spirituality. I'm Lynn Wyeth, creator of Namology Science, this ability to know all about a person's personality and the soul's purpose from a person's name. The beautiful inspirational music that you just heard is from Shine by Dee L'Amour, and you can hear more of her music by visiting DLamour.com. It's DLEMOR.com, and we always end our show with her song that's called The Shine. Our topic today is about our ego and the role it plays. There's so many varying interpretations about the ego, where some say our ego is a good guy and others state it's a bad guy and it gets in our way. So what is our ego's purpose and why is an ego necessary? How do we utilize our ego to the best and highest? Find out why, where we have an ego on today's show. And our special guest today is Vincent Genna. Now, Vincent Genna is a triple power psychic, an authentic and gifted psychic with the knowledge and experience of a licensed psychologist and the big, charming personality of a showman. He combines his early background as a professional actor and singer, a master in the clinical social work, and his hospice experience helping more than 500 patients through the dying process with his uncanny skills as a metaphysician and a psychic medium. The sum total of these experiences and gifts is a psychic who can guide people not only to recognize what is preventing them from healing or attaining their dreams, but the necessary steps to get there. Now, I recognize Vincent Genna as the tell-it-like-it-is and truly authentic world-renowned spiritual teacher and psychic therapist. He combines his extraordinary psychic abilities, academic credentials, and genuine, all-loving approach to provide healing for body, mind, and spirit. Now, as a psychic therapist, Vincent uses his more than 36 years of training, research, and experience in the metaphysical, psychology, and spiritual fields to really dig deep into your psyche, to release blockages, resistances, and self-sabotaging beliefs and behaviors so that you actually have the tools that you need to live the life of your dreams. Now, thousands of followers around the world have been inspired by Vincent's warm and genuine keynote presentations on self-love and self-mastery for notable international organizations, as well as his numerous interviews on major radio and television networks. Currently, Vincent can be heard hosting his own weekly radio show called Stop Stopping Yourself, and it's on Unity Online Radio. Now, Vincent is a world-renowned psychic healer, respected spiritual teacher, and dynamic animated speaker who receives and deciphers messages from the other side to help improve our present lives. He's a psychic who can guide people not only to recognize what is preventing them from healing and attaining the dreams, but again, the necessary steps to get there. Vincent, welcome to Luminescence. So glad you could join us.
Oh, my God, Sharon, it's always fabulous to be with you. You're such a light to the world itself. Without people like you, I couldn't even get my message out there, so thank you so very much for that.
Oh, my pleasure. You know, I only have 12 guest spots this year on the show because the rest are 6 recurring guests. And so I picked my 12 favorites from over 5 years of previous radio shows. So I am just thrilled that you're here.
Wow. Wow, what a testimony. I hope I can live up to that today. That's fabulous. Thank you.
Oh, you know, you so will. You always have. Okay, so we're going to start with ego and how ego is defined. So would you start with just defining ego force and then go into why we have it?
Okay. Here is the craziest thing about the definition. You can go into either the American College Dictionary or Webster's Dictionary, and you will find in it two opposing definitions for the exact same word. So, to keep it simple, basically, ego is an identification of self. That's all it is, as it related to others, to the rest of the world. It's just self. In Greek and in Latin, it means I, and it appears in the Bible many times as ego ame, which means I am. That's it. Ego means I. But when you look it up, one definition says an identifying sense of self, and then the next, a healthy, let me put in that word, a healthy identifying sense of self, and then the second definition says an unhealthy enhanced sense of self. And I'm like, wait a minute. How can you have a healthy and an unhealthy at the same time? And it is the psychologists who actually created the issue. There was never anything mentioned by anybody spiritual back in the old days and in the Bible about the ego until Freud distinguished it as an entity or a part of our personalities, our minds, right? So once he identified it, oh, you have an ego. And he said, well, this ego has to actually make choices between your id, which is instinct gratification desires, and your superego, which is more of the soul's intuitive understanding of some good choices. So on a daily basis, all day long, you have to make those choices between the two. Well, that created such an issue for people that it was then brought into the spiritual realm. That is the craziest thing. And here's why it was brought into the spiritual realm, and this is the funniest part. As humans, since the beginning of time, we needed to, well, let me correct that. Not so much since the beginning of time. There was a time period that it began, but it was when we separated from source, our higher self, the God force, whatever you want to call it, and we forgot who we are as divine beings, and we just saw ourselves as human beings, and we forgot the spiritual aspect to us. Once we did that, and we started feeling bad about ourselves, because the brain has two highest functions, the first to keep us alive, and the second highest function is to protect us, which is the way it keeps us alive. Well, it does it both physically and emotionally. So to protect us emotionally, it came up with defense mechanisms. So in other words, if you felt bad about yourself, I'm not good enough, I'm not lovable, the brain could not tolerate that. That caused too much emotional pain. So it would actually help you create a certain set of beliefs now to shield you and protect you from those bad set of beliefs. So it's more like, well, it's not my fault. I'm not good enough. Of course I'm good enough. It's they're not good enough. It's my boss who's not good enough. It's my partner who's not good enough. It's my father. It's my mother. It's the government. It's whoever is not good enough. We found ways of blaming. So blame became a defense mechanism. All right? And the legitimate term for it is projection. We project our issues onto somebody else, and we call them the problem rather than us. Okay. So that's been happening for a long time. Now, where you see that in history is in religion. That's where you see it first, as a matter of fact. Back at the beginnings of religion, we were weak. And as soon as Christianity started, we were sinners. Sinners now. You're a sinner. So here came down on the planet this example, Jesus, as a spiritual example, in the stories, in his teachings, right, as to who we're supposed to be and try to remember who we are. That's all he kept talking about. You could be this, you could be that. You can love, you can forgive. Well, we had a hard time believing that about ourselves, right? So instead of saying that we can do that, we said, oh my gosh, he's the only one that can do that. And the reason why we can't do that is because we're sinners. But we can strive to be like that, but we're sinners.
I just thought we couldn't be like that because we were too lazy to do the work involved.
Well, that is, okay, then when it came to contemporary times, we were lazy. That's another, right? You just came up with another contemporary blame. We're lazy. You're procrastinators. You're lazy. And throughout the course of history, you will hear the blame. Okay, so now New Age and New Thought movement comes along. Boom, we're not sinners anymore. You don't need to be forgiven. You're already forgiven. You don't need to be saved. You're already saved. You're connected to God. You're magnificent. You can manifest all you want. But, and there was a big but. Now, we didn't get rid of the defense mechanism of blame because it's built into the brain. So even your most contemporary luminaries, authors, spiritual teachers, what are they now blaming? Oh, you're no longer a sinner, but chances are you're going to have a hard time being magnificent and evolving to the higher self because you know what gets in the way now? Your ego. Oh, my. Now, that sounds so much better than you're a sinner. And even Marianne Williamson herself in Return to Love, actually, I'm sorry, not Return to Love, that was one of her really good books. In A Course of Miracles that she teaches, she writes an entire chapter about how we're supposed to aspire to be Christ-like, like Jesus. That's our potential. And then a big giant paragraph that says, but chances are we're not going to reach that because our ego gets in the way.
Ouch.
So we set up blame. We set up an out clause. Now, when I was getting my psychology degrees, I did a lot of study on the self because that was where my basic curiosity was and interest. And in it, I discovered that even though they think we self-enhance, we really don't self-enhance as a belief. We self-enhance as a defense mechanism, which has nothing to do with the ego, because the lower the ego, the more you self-enhance. Not the higher the ego. The lower your ego value is, the defense is to self-enhance. The perfect example of that is a narcissist. A narcissist has no ego. It is so destroyed. It is so belittled and torn apart that the person feels so bad about him or herself that they need to compensate and enhance themselves, over-enhance their self-value, over-enhance their self-worth. But the major way they do that is by tearing everybody else down. Okay? If you ever listen to a true narcissist, yes, you will hear them praise themselves and how great they are and how good they are, better than others. But for the most part, they're putting everybody else down in order to make themselves shine. See? So if you think about it like this, if you have a light in a room that's on in a lamp, okay, there are two ways of brightening that lamp. You can either put a higher wattage bulb in the lamp, or what can you do? What's the other thing that you can do?
I would think you'd turn on another lamp.
Well, no, I don't. No, actually, to make that one lamp brighter, you turn out all the other lights.
Oh, how sad. Got it.
Exactly. So now listen to a narcissist, and what you will hear him or her doing is dimming everybody else's light so that theirs could look brighter. So that is not an indication of a high ego, a high sense of self. That's actually an indication of a low sense of self. And so it is not as misunderstood that the ego gets in our way. Actually, the problem is we don't have big enough ego. The greatest gift that God gave us is our self-identifying ability to distinguish ourselves from the source, to distinguish ourselves from each other. So, like this, let's say you have the big sun out there, that's God. I'm just using this as an analogy. Okay. And the big sun out there wants company. So what it does is it divides itself into now 100 little suns. But all those 100 little suns are still gathered together. Well, as long as those 100 little suns are gathered together, they never see their own light. They're still one big giant sun. So in order for each individual sun to see its own light, what does it need to do? It needs to separate from the one. So that actually gives two answers as to why we separated and left home to start with, is so that we could see our own light. But the importance of stepping away from the big sun is to see your own individual light. And in order to see your own light, you need ego, because it's the only thing that lets you feel different than the rest. It's your defense mechanisms that get in the way, and that's the misunderstanding. It has nothing to do with the ego. It has to do with what your brain winds up creating to make you feel better about yourself. I do this work with people all the time, Sharon. People have to start feeling better about themselves. But that is how important ego is. And even God, there are places in the Bible that prove that ego is important. You want to know where?
Where?
Okay, no, go ahead. What was your question before you were going to ask that? I'll come back to that because that's fun.
Well, I was going to say, how do we deal with early programming? I mean, I had so many kids in the classroom that their early programming was that they weren't good enough and that they stunk and that there was something wrong with them. And then we had to deal with that when they were teenagers in my classroom. And so I want to give you our commercial break to think about that, to say, how can people get out of that thinking? Okay, stay tuned.
Your conscious connection to a more mindful world. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM. OMTimes Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. OMTimes, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
I'm Kathy Williams, host of Sexy Mom Abundant Life radio show on Thursdays at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific. On the show, we explore living abundantly in every area of your life. Ways to let go of limiting patterns and beliefs and to step into the flow of creativity and possibility, knowing you are supported by the universe.
Mark Twain said the two most important days in your life are the day you were born and the day you find out why. The why is hidden in your name. Sharon Lynn Wyeth has created a scientific way of deciphering your name to reveal your contract for this lifetime. And your name even specifies the 7 areas that are subsets of your soul's overall goal. Your name identifies who you are to both yourself and others. What does your name say about you? Contact Sharon Lynn Wyeth at info@knowthename.com for your stunning name review.
These are the sounds of a dinner. A dinner that almost didn't happen. A dinner now served, thanks to people like you. Due to COVID-19, 17 million more Americans may face hunger. Feeding America is helping our neighbors in need. And if you're able, you can too. Donations are being accepted at feedingamerica.org/coronavirus. Brought to you by the Ad Council and Feeding America, 200 food banks strong.
Welcome back to Luminescence, Common Sense Spirituality. This is your host, Sharon Lynn Wyeth. My special guest today is Vincent Genna, a triple psychic who is just knowledgeable and looks at things so differently because of all of his experiences. Okay, Vincent, if somebody has been programmed since they were very young by their parents, which I have seen enough of those kids as they're coming through, they're the ones that are usually victims and that everybody else is picking on because they don't have that defense and they're already used to being picked on at home. How do they get out of this to develop an ego that serves them?
Right. You see, now you're just giving a perfect example of what it looks like not to have an ego. And because when you have a healthy sense of self, which is a healthy ego, you don't make the choices that are risky. You make better choices for yourself. But like you said, if they've been ingrained to believe that they're not worthy, they're compensating for that with the I don't care attitude about life. I don't care about you. I don't care about anything. And the brain steps in and does protect them, but not in a healthy way. It makes them then blame, right? And they become angered and enraged and they act out and do all sorts of things that we know are which are very harmful towards themselves and towards others. The most important thing for those children also resides in another answer that was once given to us more than 2,000 years ago. And that is the concept of one man can save a nation. And in fact, it's not about one man, a male, right? It's humankind. One human who can step in for you, who can believe in you, who can help you see who you truly are through their eyes. The work you do with these kids, Sharon, is so vital because you may be, and this is a lot of pressure to understand, but you may be the only adult, the only respectful person in these children's lives who even believe in them. And that's what they need. They need a sense of belief. Now, they're going to do it on their own. You know what? No. They need help. They're not just going to sit there and turn around. If you don't have a high sense of self, you don't see value in stepping and doing anything positive for yourself. There always needs to be somebody who then comes and grabs you by the hand and says, I believe in you. You are worth something. That's what they need. That's all they need. That's why we're so important to each other. That's why we were put on the earth together, to discover ourselves, but to help other people discover themselves. And the moment they have that, right, like just look, this is what we're doing right now. The whole reason why you have me on the show is to have your listeners hear that they can be believed in, that they're valuable, that they have worth. Their worth is not defined by their upbringing. Their worth is not defined by how fancy the home is that they're living in, or if they even have a home. Their worth is defined by the fact that they were created. And they were created by a higher source. So they have to believe in something different, which is why it is easier for them to believe if somebody's believing with them. Right? They need a partner.
Well, and we could always say that the creator of all that is doesn't make mistakes. So if you exist, he created you, and there is no mistake.
Well, here's the other thing, okay? We look at the creator as having made us like it made an avocado, okay? No. All right, the avocado has a big pit. I got to talk to Spirit about that as to why it made the avocado with little flesh and a big giant pit. That may have been its only mistake. But
okay, you want to know why there's the avocado has a big pit? Okay,
why?
Because it's the seed of a huge tree. Absolutely huge. And it's just the beginnings. And inside that huge pit, there's healing powers in case the body gets sick if they eat that seed.
I never knew that. You see, you just gave the answer, isn't that? Now I realize, see, there's never a mistake. Wow. I'm glad you said that. I'm glad. I love that. We were created differently. We were created, like I said earlier, by the source, by the power, by God dividing itself into us. That's why it was said we were created in its image. We are just as divine. The problem is we forgot that. It didn't. We forgot that. And we're supposed to be nurtured into believing that about ourselves, to believing that we're magnificent, to believing that we are unlimited. But in the world today, who doesn't have an issue or a problem? And then those are the people having children. And those problems don't go away just because a woman gets pregnant. They have to go away by the work you do, by the time you spend on yourself. So their issues get passed down. And there's so many relationships that are breaking apart that these children are growing up either single parent or parentless altogether or being dumped onto somebody else, and that's how they feel. They feel broken. They feel abandoned. They feel rejected. And then we wonder why they're acting out the way they're acting. There's no ego at all. Their ego must be stroked, enhanced, and inflated as best as possible. They have to be reminded of their good things. There are so many of those lost people with unbelievable talents, they don't even know that they're talented. And so where I help and where you help, I'm sure you do the same work as I do. I let them, for a moment, or the time they spend with me, see themselves through my eyes. See, being psychic and not just a psychologist therapist, I can see what's in their psyche. I can see their gifts as well as I see their pains and their hurts and their scars. So when I reflect onto them who they really are, it may be for the first time in their lives, they're seeing something beautiful, someone wonderful. Really, that's me? Really, you think so? And I'm like, yes, give it a shot, give it a chance. You know, you've got to believe in something other than what you were taught to believe in. You're better than that. That's where I spend most of my work. I never disinflate an ego. That is the most wrong thing. But here is why that happened. I can't blame, even though it sounds like I'm correcting and conflicting with all these wonderful luminaries. No, they did the job they were supposed to do. They had to bring us to another level. But that's like going from elementary school level to now middle school level. And when you learn history at middle school level, they teach it to you in a way that protects you, that's simplified. Now, when you go from middle school and you go into college and you're learning the same history, you're sitting there and thinking you're in a different world, in a different country, because you're hearing things you never heard before. Are you kidding? That's what we did? That's what happened? Oh, my God, that's not what I learned before. Because they think, the adults think they need to constantly protect us, so they shield us from all that information. Well, the luminaries are doing the exact same thing. They're protecting us. And it's like, okay, just hold each other's hands, sing Kumbaya, Om here and there. I love your program, but Om here and there, and everything is going to be better. But you know why I love the name of your program? Because why? The words mean God.
Yes.
It's like, and it's the I am, God itself. If you read chapter 1, the creation, this power, and of course we're writing the words, the dialogue for God, but it's supposed to be God's words, right? And here are the words. This is like, and God created the land, and God created the firmament, and God created this, and saw it was good. And God created this, and God created that, and saw it was good. What do you think that was saying about God? How could God feel that anything it did was good if it didn't have ego? And
Good
then,
point.
Right? And then Jesus comes down. In the chapter John, in the Gospel according to John alone, Jesus says, I am at least 22 times. At least 20. I am the good shepherd. I am the light of the world. I am my Father are one. I am this. I am the way and the truth and the life. My God, based on what they're saying today, that man was the most egotistical man that existed. But what
Wonderful
they don't tell you, right? But what they don't tell you was that the rest of his sentences were cut off because the higher religious leaders did not want us to know the rest of what Jesus said. And the rest of what Jesus said was, and so are you. So this man was pointing out his greatness as well as our greatness. Because he knew our problem wasn't that we were over ego inflated. He knew we had no ego because of the way we were treated since the beginning of time. The Romans, the Egyptians, anybody who was coming after people, killing people, torturing them, the diseases, the plagues, the famine, the all of that. And you're telling me that our problem is that we have too much of an ego? No, we don't have any ego.
You know, there's a fabulous book that we were made to read when I was in 11th grade in high school to say how old it was. It was called Stranger in a Strange Land. And when you really understood a concept or another person, you would say you grokked them because the name of the stranger that had come in was nicknamed Grok. And the whole point of this very long, engaging story was that I am God and so are you.
That's right.
That the Father and I are one is another way of saying it.
That's right. And you just said ego. You just said it in English. And that's all the ego was created to do, was to identify you as one being, but one being with God. That's why I said the title of my book is God and Your Ego Are One. Because when you finally identify yourself as the highest being you are, you would recognize that you are divine and that you are God as well. And the moment you recognize that, you start acting like that.
Well,
People
I remember
acting divine.
Right. Well, I remember thinking, if I had ever been divine, look at how far I had fallen, until I did so much reading and so much prayer and so much meditation to realize that we are parts of what I want to call the body of our Creator. So the heart is one with the rest of the body and the liver is one with the rest of the body. And every cell is important to make that body function and work. And we are a cell in the body of God. So we are God because we are a cell and a part of God.
That's right. And just like you can take any cell out of our body and take the DNA from it and create a whole other body, that's what cloning is all about. It took scientists forever to figure out that they could do that, you know, and thank God they're not trying to make other humans. Maybe they are somewhere in the world. But just the same as one cell represents the whole body. In a hologram, if you take a hologram, you see a picture of an apple, and it's a hologram, which is a virtual 3D picture of it. You take a slice of that apple, and you take it away from the apple, and you put it on a different part. Not only does that apple reform into one whole, the slice you just took apart turns into the full apple.
Well,
because
you think
we are one. That's why we are the universe.
Well, it's the same thing. I always thought that the miracle wasn't death and where we go and shedding the body, but the miracle was from two cells getting together and creating an incredible human being. The body for somebody to grow and learn in.
That's right. That's the physical miracle. Yes, you're absolutely right to be able to do that. And for the body to just live the way it lives by itself, the force that we put into it, that allows it to do that is a miracle. This entire physical existence is a miracle. It's wonderful. It's beautiful. But the funny thing about it is we help to create it, and we also manifest it now. But a lot of people don't want to see. So we go back in time and go back to Jesus. So here he is telling us that we're one with God, that we can forgive our enemies, we can dine with them, that we could create. All we have to do is ask God to tap into its power, tap into the source, and you can create all you want. You can have abundance in love. You can have abundance in health and well-being, in friendship, in everything, if you just believe. Now, times were so difficult back then, we had a difficult time believing that we could do that. That's why we turned him into the only Son of God and living God. So the way he's being praised and honored is actually the way we should be praising and honoring ourselves, but we don't want to feel that way because we're too lowly, we're sinners, and if we're that good, then we have no excuses for some of the choices we're making. And we like excuses. And we make them and say them every day to ourselves, to each other. Like we said earlier, we're lazy. Oh, I can't do that. Or I love it, if we don't like using the negative sounding things that we criticize with, we go in the opposite direction. We go, I'm such a perfectionist that I could never get that done the right way because I'd never be happy with it. So we're saying the same thing. We're saying we're completely limited, but it sounds so much better when we say we're perfectionists, doesn't it? You know? I'm so altruistic, I want to help everybody. I'm so empathic that I feel people's pain so much that I can't help them because otherwise it drains me completely. You know, I volunteer in every single thing that I can. I'm so overworked I can't help anymore. So we go in both directions. We give ourselves excuses for being weak no matter what, whether we're sinners or whether the ego's getting in the way, because we have a difficult time believing we're that good and perfect.
Well, we had another guest on, Marilyn Raphael, who does the Arcturian newsletter, and her whole summation at the end of the program was, if we could just understand and believe that we and our Father are one, which is what Yeshua ben Joseph repeatedly said, that we would be there, that it would be that That's simple right. If we could believe that.
That's right. That is the simplest and yet the most difficult, because we're afraid, because unfortunately we've had bad examples before us. Here.
Okay, so we want to talk about bad examples in a minute, Vincent. Yes. We've got our second and last commercial break. Stay tuned.
Right.
A conscious lifestyle for a mindful life. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM. Host your show on IOM FM, the radio network of OMTimes Media, one of the more recognized brand names in the conscious community, and is backed by the extensive marketing reach of OMTimes. Hosting a show on IOM FM immediately connects you with our extensive dedicated community.
Hello, I'm Sandy Sedgbeer, host of OMTimes Magazine's flagship radio show, What is Going On? My passion is sifting through information, research, and innovations from new thought teachers, speakers, and researchers pushing back the boundaries of what we know about life, energy, metaphysics, and the universe. I love shifting perceptions about who we are, why we're here, and how quickly impossible becomes normal when we open our minds, expand our awareness, and accept that the only limits that exist are those we place upon ourselves. So if you're the kind of forward-thinking, eager investigator of what lies beyond the current reality that most perceive, why not make a date to come play with me in the field of possibilities at 4 p.m. Pacific Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Time every Thursday, and together we can discover what's really going on.
Are you feeling lost, confused, absolutely clueless? No way out, over, under, or through? Then it's time to have the Light Keepers, through their conduit, Sharon Lynn Wyeth, guide you by shining their light, illuminating the right path for you. Let Sharon share the wisdom of the ancient masters to guide you on what is coming next for you and to show you the silver lining in your current circumstances. Contact Sharon Lynn Wyeth at info@knowthename.com for a joyful, info-packed Lightkeepers session.
If I could be you,
and you could be me,
for just 1 hour,
if you could find a way
to get inside
each other's mind,
walk a mile in my shoes.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
We've all felt left out. And for some, that feeling lasts more than a moment. We can change that. Learn how at belongingbeginswithus.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Welcome back to Luminescence, Common Sense Spirituality. This is your host, Sharon Lynn Wyeth, and our special guest today is Vincent Genna, a triple crown, I want to say, psychic. Vincent, I'd like to give you a story that I heard about the ego and get your response on that, and then we'll go back to the bad examples that you were going to share. And the story was that the ego was created because when mankind first had physicality or bodies, the spirit would enter the body and then it would say things like, oh, I wonder what would happen if I jumped off this cliff. And of course, it was too high for the body, and so the body would go splat and it would die. Or the body would go swimming, and then it wouldn't come up for a breath of air, and the body would die. And so the souls had to keep making more and more bodies because they kept destroying them. And so the souls got together and said, we need to have something to warn us when we're fixing to kill the body so we don't destroy so many of these things so quickly. So they developed the ego. And the ego was there to warn them, don't jump out of that high of a tree because it's likely you're going to break something and then it could damage you permanently. And don't swim too deep without some assistance because it'll puncture your ears and then you won't be able to get up for breath. And so the ego was there as a warning type of thing that, hey, this kills the body if you're not being careful. And so people over time gave power to the ego instead of realizing that the ego was their friend. And that's where the error came in place. So I'd like your reaction to that story.
Oh, that's interesting. But there are a lot of fanciful stories to try to explain something, especially earlier on in time. What they were explaining is actually making more connection with the intuitive self. It's the soul that warns us. It's not your ego. The ego does nothing but feel. The soul is what lets us know that what we're about ready to do is not right. It's not good. So it never is a part of the conscious mind. You have to understand your ego is not located in your unconscious mind. It's located in your conscious thinking mind. And your conscious thinking mind only accounts for 2 to 5% of your entire mind. So that inner voice would never come from your conscious mind because thinking would get in its way. So, for example, if it was ego that said, oh, don't do that to the body, and I can prove this right now, all right? So you got people who are smoking, okay? They're smokers. Now, they hear all the information that smoking can cause cancer. Now, based on that story, the ego should be telling them, oh, you should stop smoking. But in fact, it's their thinking mind that says, that's not going to hurt me. Their soul is telling them this isn't good for you. And what can counter, the only thing that can counter intuition and the soul's mind is the conscious thinking mind. So ego is not in there. It's actually your conscious thinking mind that even talks you out of an ego feeling. Like if you want to feel good about something, somebody is complimenting you on the beautiful artwork you just did, right? And you turn around and you say, oh, that was nothing. Oh, somebody could do so much better. That is not ego speaking. That is your thinking mind and your feeling of inadequacy. You're not good enough. So you see, ego never talks to us to help guide us. That's the reason why it doesn't get us in trouble. It's all the other defense mechanisms that step in the way. It's the maladaptive mind. My book that I just written, that's going to be published, God, it's not working. The Key to Finally Stop Saying That. That's my book that's going to be coming out hopefully this fall, so everybody's got to look for that.
What's it called?
Scientifically, completely. Well, that's what I said. The name of it is called God, It's Not Working. The Key to Finally Stop Saying That. And so, because we walk around, what do? We try all of these practices to create a great life, to understand life, to manifest all we want, and we keep saying, God, it's not working. It's not working. Why isn't it working? So in this book is finally the key to stop saying that and to make everything work. Right? So the point is, no, that story is not correct about the ego. That is more, like I said, it's talking, if anything, about intuition. Our egos were given to us before the body was formed. We were created as energies way before we came down here on this planet. And like I said, if you use that analogy of the metaphor of the sun, the universes and the planets were created so the individual lights from the sun can go and explore and discover themselves in their own light, and they created this physical world to do that in. So we had ego way before we even got down here, but we had to learn how to feel it, how to help it, how to keep it healed, how to keep us feeling good about ourselves. So remember, anything that we do that's stupid, like jumping off of a bridge to kill the body, has nothing to do with the ego. Okay?
Well, I appreciate that clarification, because I'd been hearing that story quite a bit. Okay, so you wanted to give us before the break some bad examples.
All right. Here is the reason why. Okay. We separated from the God source a long time ago. We did it in Atlantis, okay? Which goes back way before even biblical stories, okay? So it's before we even had full bodies and we were incarnating up and down, or sometimes we would just be energy forms on the earth at one time. And by the time that, civilization came along, and then societies, big societies, like say Egypt, for example, came along, we forgot consciously that we were God, but unconsciously we still had a slight connection, and we felt that we should be. And some actually thought they were, and they were made pharaohs. The pharaohs of Egypt, they actually worship because they believe they were God incarnate as leaders on the planet. And they said that many a time, right? So we had these feelings, but then what did these leaders do? Instead of using their powers the right way, they used them the wrong way, their guidance the wrong way, and they enslaved, and they hurt people, and they made themselves powerful and everybody else weak, and then they had battles, and then they had wars, and we can keep going and looking from that time period, whether we went into Alexander the Great, who had issues, if we went into more of people like contemporary times like Hitler and Osama bin Laden and all of those horrible people who thought that they were great, we associate those beings with having an inflated ego and sense of self, the God feeling, right? That grandiose understanding, the complex of thinking you're better than everybody else. That is what we now associate, or what psychologists have associated with a high sense of ego and an inflated ego. And that is completely wrong, because, like I said, in order to get to that level, you're putting everybody else down. Because think about it for a minute. Any of those leaders had major issues of paranoia. They thought everybody really hated them. Everybody was out to get them. That's not an inflated ego. An inflated ego would never believe that anybody was out to get them. They would believe everybody really cared about them. They would believe that they were millions of friends with everybody, and they would act as such. Okay? Mother Teresa had a higher ego than any of the people she was out helping, which is the reason why she was able to go out and help, which was the reason why she was able to give up her worldly possessions, which she was a millionaire, came from wealthy parents and left that. That takes a high sense of self, a healthy ego, to believe in yourself so much that you know you're worth more than planetary means and money and value that way. And again, Jesus, Gandhi did the same thing. He had a better ego than most. Here he was a lawyer. That's what he was. He goes and he travels in his home country after he gets back from college and getting and passing the bar, right? And he's traveling through India and he's seeing the destitute and his people suffering under the hands of the British and suffering with each other and conflicting religions, and self-proclaims that he's a spiritual teacher and starts walking around teaching. You have to have a pretty damn good ego to do that.
Yes, most definitely.
Okay? I mean, Martin Luther King Jr. is sharing his dreams with everybody. No person with a deflated ego would ever do that. They have to have a good sense of self. And any of our true leaders who believed that they had something of value had to believe in themselves so much to share it. They required ego in order to do that. And it wasn't overinflated. It was healthy enough for them to share a positive message. I have finally, after I had been tormented my entire youth until I was 17 years old, picked on, beat up, shoved in lockers, head flushed in toilets, spit on, peed on almost every day of my life. And then I got home and I was beaten by my parents because they had mental pathology. I was sexually molested by my babysitter and my parish priest. Believe me, I did not have an ego. I had no ego whatsoever. It took me most of my life to develop it to a healthy sense to be able to even do the work I'm doing now, Sharon. It wasn't because I had a false sense of confidence that people confuse as ego.
You know what, Vincent, we are so out of time, and I am just so excited also about your second book coming out that will all be on this ego. We always close our show with the music, The Shine, and everyone, if you would like to get a hold of Vincent Genna, just go to my website, knowthename.com, go under the schedule page, and all of his information is right here so that you can just click and you can get a hold of him. Or you can go to, what's your website really quickly because we're out of time, Vincent?
VincentGenna.com.
It is your name. Of course, it's so easy. All right, everyone. That's how you get a hold of Vincent. Thank you so much for being on the show. Next week, we are coming back again, and we will have Susan Rowland on the show again once again. Everyone have a great week. This is Sharon Lynn Wyeth signing off.
So long ago, gazing in the mirror, an image of an angel smiling back at her. No wounds or imperfections, just beauty and its glow. Her laughter and her heart, a reflection of her soul. And I want to shine like the sun and smile to stop the rain. And I want to dance with the wind and believe in dreams again. parts of her. The light slightly dimmed, her reflection unseen, and all that she knew